"You came here to laugh at me," Mel said, his voice a low growl, "to show off your big success while I was slinging hash in this dump." "No, Mel," Angelo said, his own voice cracking, the charm finally gone. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go. You were right. You were always the smart one. You built this place. It's small, it's cozy, but it's real, and it's yours." Mel looked at his younger brother, the golden boy, now stripped of his shine. He saw not a rival, but a reflection of his own fears, his own struggles. He didn't write him a check. He didn't offer a loan. He did something much more, Mel. He tossed him an apron. "You want to learn how to run a real restaurant," Mel grunted. "The sink's in the back. The dishes aren't going to wash themselves." And so the next morning, Angelo Sharples, late of the Chicago culinary scene, began his new career at the bottom of the food chain. He traded his sharkskin suit for a stained apron and his title of CEO for that of dishwasher. It wasn't the bailout he had come for, but as he stood in the steam and clatter of the kitchen surrounded by the strange, chaotic, but fiercely loyal family of Mel's Diner, he realized it might be the rescue he actually needed. Part 11, The Art of the Burger. The assimilation of Angelo Sharples into the life of Mel's Diner was not a smooth process. It was like trying to fit a square Gucci loafer wearing peg into a round, grease-stained hole. For the first few weeks, he inhabited the dish pit like a caged panther, his elegant manicured hands, once accustomed to signing checks for thousands of dollars, now plunged into murky water battling the stubborn remnants of his brother's chili. He was a good dishwasher. He was, in fact, an excellent dishwasher. He organized the plates by size, he polished the silverware until it gleamed, and he cleaned the grease trap without a single complaint, an act of such profound humility that it left Mel speechless for a full 10 minutes. But a chef cannot be confined to the sink for long. The instinct is too strong. Angelo's rehabilitation began to manifest as a series of small, unauthorized culinary interventions, a pinch of oregano in the hash browns, a sprig of parsley artfully placed on a plate of meatloaf. He would whisper suggestions to Vera about the proper temperature for brewing tea, or demonstrate to Jolene the correct way to fold a napkin into a swan, a skill that was both impressive and entirely useless in the context of Mel's Diner. Mel, who monitored his kitchen with the vigilance of a prison warden, noticed everything. He would taste the hash browns, his brow furrowed in suspicion. "Did you do something to these?" he'd bark at Angelo. "I may have introduced a hint of the Mediterranean." Angelo would reply, his voice smooth as olive oil. "This is Phoenix, not Tuscany," Mel would roar. "And these are potatoes, not a canvas for your frustrated artistry." The simmering sibling rivalry, which had defined their relationship for 50 years, found its new battlefield on the flat-top grill. And the prize was the soul of the Mel's Burger. To Angelo, the Mel's Burger was a culinary crime scene, a preformed frozen patty slapped on the grill, cooked to a uniform shade of gray, and served on a generic cottony bun with a slice of processed American cheese. It was, in his professional opinion, an insult to the entire bovine species. "Melvin, we have to talk," he said one afternoon, cornering his brother by the walk-in cooler. He was holding a Mel's Burger in his hand as if it were a piece of radioactive waste. "This is not a burger. This is a cry for help on a bun. It's the best-selling item on the menu." Mel growled his defensiveness, kicking into high gear. "That's because your customers don't know any better." Angelo argued, his passion for gastronomy overriding his precarious employment status. "A burger can be a thing of beauty. Freshly ground chuck, a proper sear to create a Maillard crust, a toasted brioche bun, a house-made aioli." "A house-made what aioli?" Mel interrupted. "It's mayonnaise, you fraud, and if you think I'm putting arugula on my burgers, you've been sniffing too much dish soap." The argument escalated a loud, passionate debate that was part culinary philosophy and part 50-year-old sibling squabble. Alice, sensing that things were about to reach a boiling point, stepped in. "There's only one way to settle this," she said, her voice cutting through the shouting. "A cook-off, a blind taste test, the burger war of Mel's Diner." The idea was so perfectly absurdly dramatic that it appealed to both brothers' egos. The rules were established. Each brother would create their ideal burger. The waitresses would serve them to a panel of judges consisting of the diner's most loyal regulars, Henry Lenny, the garbage man, and Artie, the construction worker. The burgers would be labeled only A and B. The judge's decision would be final. The day of the burger war, a palpable tension filled the diner. The two brothers worked at opposite ends of the grill, a culinary Mason-Dixon line running between them. Mel in his corner worked with his usual gruff efficiency, slapping his frozen patties onto the hot steel, the familiar sizzle, a comforting sound of tradition. Angelo in his was a whirlwind of focused intensity, gently forming his hand-ground patties, toasting his brioche buns in clarified butter, and whipping up a garlic aioli that made Jolene's eyes roll back in her head with pleasure. The two plates were a study in contrasts. Mel's burger was a humble, unpretentious stack of meat, cheese, and bun, served with a side of standard-issue fries. Angelo's creation was a work of art, a towering masterpiece of perfectly cooked beef melted Gruyere and a single elegant leaf of arugula served with a side of those dreaded Pommes frites. The judges were seated at the counter, their faces set with a seriousness usually reserved for jury duty. Alice served them, placing the two plates before each man. "Gentlemen," she announced, "let the war begin." They ate in silence, their chewing the only sound in the hushed diner. They took a bite of Burger A, then a thoughtful sip of water, then a bite of Burger B. They scribbled notes on napkins. Vera, who had appointed herself official scorekeeper, tried to tabulate their scores using a complicated system involving fractions and decimal points. Finally, the verdict was in. Alice collected the napkins. She read the results aloud. "The winner," she said, pausing for dramatic effect, with a vote of 3-0, "is Burger A." A stunned silence fell over the room. Burger A was Mel's burger. Angelo stared, his face a mask of disbelief. But mine had a Maillard crust. Henry, wiping his mouth with a napkin, delivered the final definitive judgment. The fancy one was good, he conceded, real good. But this one, he said, pointing to the last remaining bite of Mel's burger on his plate, tastes like, well, it tastes like Mel's. It wasn't a victory of quality, but of identity. Angelo had made a better burger, but Mel made their burger. He made the burger they had been eating for years, the one they ate after a long day, the one that tasted of familiarity and comfort and 1,000 shared conversations. Angelo looked at his brother, who was trying and failing to suppress a triumphant smirk. In that moment, Angelo finally understood. The success of Mel's Diner wasn't about gourmet ingredients or fancy techniques. It was about something much simpler and much harder to create a sense of belonging. His brother wasn't just a cook. He was the keeper of a tradition, the purveyor of a feeling. The next day, there was a new special on the menu board written in Mel's familiar scrawl. It read, "The Angelo Burger, same as the regular burger, but with a fancy pants pickle, $1 extra." It was Mel's version of an olive branch. And as Angelo stood at the grill, promoted from dishwasher to prep cook, showing his brother the proper way to dice an onion, a 50-year-old rivalry finally began to feel a little less like a war and a little more like Family, Part 12, The Mystic Jukebox. The Wurlitzer jukebox that stood in the corner of Mel's Diner was less a piece of musical equipment and more a member of the family. It was a moody, unpredictable, relative prone to fits of silence and the occasional jarring consumption of quarters without producing a single note. So when Mel finally broke down and called a repairman, no one thought much of it. The repairman was a strange, quiet man with eyes that seemed to be listening to a frequency no one else could hear. He worked for an hour, humming to himself, and left with a cryptic, "She's all tuned up now," listening to a new station. It was Vera who first noticed that tuned up was an understatement. She was fretting over a slow drip in her apartment's bathroom faucet, a sound that had been keeping her up at night. As she described the maddening plink-plonk-plink to Jolene, the jukebox, which had been silent all morning, suddenly whirred to life and began to play Patsy Cline's Crazy. "Well, that's a coincidence," Jolene said with a giggle. But then, as Jolene recounted a story about a handsome new neighbor who had helped her carry her groceries, the jukebox segued seamlessly into the Doors' "Hello, I Love You." Vera's eyes widened. "That's not a coincidence," she whispered, a look of profound awe on her face. "That's a sign." Alice Ever, the pragmatist, was deeply skeptical. "It's a box of wires and old records, Vera. It's not a psychic." To prove her point, she decided to conduct an experiment. She stood before the jukebox thinking intently about Tommy's upcoming final exams, a source of low-grade maternal anxiety that was never far from her mind. Okay, you big glowing oracle, she murmured. Show me something. The jukebox clicked, a record dropped, and the unmistakable sound of Pink Floyd filled the diner. We don't need no education. Alice stared at the machine, a chill running down her spine. The tipping point from spooky coincidence to full-blown paranormal phenomenon came as most things in the diner did, in the form of a financial opportunity for Mel. Henry, a man who loved a long shot, was debating whether to place a bet on a horse named Greased Lightning at the local track. "What do you think, jukebox?" he called out, half joking. He slid a quarter into the slot. The machine lit up and began to play Run for the Roses.